After about an hour, a Marine requested entrance, and after entering and saluting his superiors, he let them know that the prisoners were using English and were beginning to talk.
"What are they saying?"
Thompson asked.
They started by saying not to trust the Federation. We pointed out that the Federation aliens never attacked us and even took care of one of our own, but they attacked us and tried to kill us all. Then they switched to offering us safety and high positions within their own group.
Thompson laughed.
Denial and then bargaining. They skipped over anger?
To be fair, they started with anger, sir.
I do not understand.
Phoebe replied. Davis answered,
The 5 stages of grief. Usually you use them in reference to how we handle the death of loved ones. However, it also fits in with any loss. In this case, the loss of freedom. While they can happen in any order, they frequently happen in this order: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance.
Have they given any useful information yet?
Thompson asked.
Not yet, sir. I came to ask permission to begin questioning now that we know they can speak English.
Granted. Keep us informed.
Yes, sir.
After the Marine left the room, Admiral Davis noted the time and invited the aliens to eat. In another hour, the nocturnal aliens would awaken. However, it was still daytime on Earth due to the difference in the length of days. The meat had to be tested to ensure it was edible to the aliens, but it was found to be safe. Sometime after dinner, Vebby and Fennis needed to head back to their ship to sleep, and the Asili would come down and take their place. It was still light out, so Raleigh and the other Asili that came down on the transport ship wore dark sunglass-like visors. They were welcomed onto the ship and brought indoors where it was dim enough for them to take off their visors.
I understand you both received the translators. I apologize for the shortness of our last meeting. My name is Commander Raleigh. I would like to also introduce you to Commander Jine and Lieutenant Rasmus. They are the nocturnal species on the other ships. I will have to show you a picture of what Lieutenant Rasmus looks like because his species is extremely sensitive to any light at all.
Raleigh first showed a picture of Rasmus and then called both Jean and Rasmus. The screen was split with one side completely dark and the other was very dim. After introductions were made, the Asili were invited to eat as well, which they accepted. The Asili were just finishing their food when the same Marine from before let Thompson know that the enemy aliens were talking now. Thompson left them to oversee the rest of the questioning, and Davis took the aliens, plus Mira and Morris, on a tour of the ship while they got to know each other. It was about an hour later when General Thompson rejoined them.
Anything you can share?
Davis asked.
Yes. Let's head back to the ready room.
Thompson replied. They both guided everyone else to the ready room and waited for everyone to take a seat.
I'm not even sure where to start.
Thompson sighed.
To start, they have been here for over a millennium, maybe longer. It was hard to figure out how they were accounting for time.
There was a confused look on Raleigh's face.
Millennium?
He asked. She nodded.
1,000 years. They seem to have a longer circadian rhythm than we do. Ours is about 24 hours. Theirs sounded like it was closer to 30 hours.
Yes, their homeworld has a 30-hour day.
Raleigh replied.
Their landing on Earth puts them here before our ancestors realized this continent existed. There were people here already, but our ancestors, for the most part, came from the other side of the world.
Admiral Davis remarked, and Thompson nodded. Thompson continued.
Since then, they have been keeping other aliens away from Earth by any means necessary, and they have done different things to guide humans how they wanted us. They used those Wendigos to speak in dreams to implant ideas and morals. That was easier to do when we were fewer and more spread out as a species. They are the reason the slave trade began. Perhaps they were working on having us join them. They found we were harder to control when there were more of us because our own morals were able to break through, But by then, some people were permanently corrupted and able to spread that corruption to their children. This is why there are still hate groups, racism, and xenophobia. At this point, they know they can control us in smaller groups, so their next step was getting us into space. They found people with a propensity for inventing and began whispering into their dreams about things like electricity and machinery and flight. Mira, you encountered them in battle, but they don't apparently have to attack our minds. The aliens I spoke to didn't have specific knowledge of our most recent excursion into space, but it sounds like the intention was to get you to Alpha Centauri, cripple the ship, and then turn you and the rest of the crew into slaves to test you out, as see if humans could be tamed. As to the locations of the bases they have made here, he refused to give specifics, but there is one near here in the ocean, another in the desert, but somewhere rocky, and then another in the Appalachians. And that's just the bases on this side of the world that he was willing to talk about. We have no idea about the rest of them.
Thompson finished. Davis sighed.
It looks like we will need to coordinate with the President and the Secretary of Defense, and potentially the United Nations.
To be fair, we probably would have had to have the President contact the United Nations no matter what,
Thompson added. Over the next few days, the Admiral and the General made calls into their superiors and received new orders. They were told to port at Naval Base Ventura County in California. Captain Klubin and Commander Schwanrawis were both able to come down from God's Eye and meet with Admiral Davis and General Thompson.
I'm not sure if Chief Mira brought this up to any of you, but you look very similar to legends as well as one of our oceanic creatures.
Admiral Davis finally broached to Fennis and Vibi. They both chuckled.
She did. She wanted us to be prepared for awkward questions. I would like to meet your octopi and see if we are related.
We are in the Pacific Ocean. There are many octopi in these waters. I'm surprised your people didn't see any when they were pulling up the dead from the ocean.
Davis replied.
No one reported seeing any. Do you mind if we take a look around?
Did you need us to slow the ships down or stop?
Davis asked.
No need. We're much faster in the water.
In short order, all of the Flexusri jumped overboard. After a few moments, Fennis added,
We don't breathe fire, by the way, or turn to stone at night.
Thompson barked a laugh at the sudden quip.
The Asili did try to land and explore here. This is more Commander Raleigh's story to tell, but they did land here and were likely hunted down by the slavers.
It was a few hours later when the Flexusri leapt up to the ship deck, surprising everyone on deck. After everyone calmed back down, Vebi came over to the group.
We were able to communicate after a fashion. They are intelligent, but don't have any verbal language. We were able to use tentacle language with them, but it was very different. They are not interested in getting to know us or anyone else. They are comfortable where they are at. Well, at least the ones we were able to speak with. Others may have different views. We also asked about any odd structures that look like they were made and not grown. They described what sounds like that aquatic base we heard about. We didn't want to check it out due to how far away it is from here, and to also potentially cause us to be attacked.
Rear Admiral, if we could go and make some map notes together so we have a better idea of where we're looking at for that enemy base?
Davis asked.
Yes, of course.
They replied. Vebi gestured for a few other Flexusri to join them. During the trip to Naval Base Ventura County, the Drala practiced on the wind currents.
I really understand the dragon myths now.
Another sailor remarked to Mira,
When they are standing on deck, I could see the gargoyle myths, but in the air, dragons for sure.
When they finally reached the naval base, Thompson suggested that any aliens that wished to attend the meeting travel with them, so that the American people didn't see the transporters and fear them, as they would need to be careful about how they were introduced to humanity. The last transporter came down with travel bedding, so that if they stayed on the mainland for longer than their day, which they were expecting, they would be able to rest comfortably. Once at the Navy base, they exited the ship as it got dark and turned off the streetlights to help reduce eyes on them. A curfew had been called as well. They knew that adding a curfew would piss off the servicemen on base, but it would be lifted as soon as everyone made it onto the C-40 Clipper that would take everyone and their cargo to Camp David. This would allow everyone to meet in safety and with the least amount of eyes. By the time they made it to Camp David, Commander Morris had been replaced by a higher-ranking officer from NASA. While Mira had stayed with the aliens most of the time, there had been little for her to do as the new ambassador for Earth to the Federation. She helped with the slang, and when Camp David was brought up, explained that it wasn't a base or something similar, but a large secluded stretch of land that was set aside as a safe place for president of the country to have their vacations or to meet with other leaders away from the eyes and ears of the press. Once at Camp David, the 5 aliens that were able to be on Earth safely met with the president as well as the president of the United Nations, who was from Germany. After explaining about the translator and hearing that Mira, Davis, and Thompson had all received one and had no ill effects, they both agreed to have a translator so that they didn't have to keep relying on translations. Several others also received them so that communications would be easier for everyone. Once everyone was ready, they got down to talking about what they knew for sure, what they suspected, and what was learned from the captives. They all looked at a map of the world and highlighted areas of potential bases and areas that have strong legends of creatures that terrorized regions. After looking over the areas of influence of the various legends, Commander Schwanrawis pointed out how the areas each had no more than 3 main legends, and then how those legends were spread out. They looked at the ages of the legends, and the last time there had been new stories of the creature. As they started putting dates to the legends and regions, Thompson pointed out how the activity was strongest when those regions were the powerhouses of the regions. The Asian regions were active when the various dynasties and emperors were strongest. Those legends died down as the European legends became stronger, and then those died down as the North American legends became stronger. There were still a few European legends that were strong, as well as a few in the Asian continent and the African continent. These were all areas where there was either a strong world presence or unrest in the region. It became imperative that the aliens be introduced to the world leaders, and it would need to be fast. The slavers would already know the Federation was here and would begin amping up their machinations or even outright attack. Very quickly, the President of the United Nations called an emergency meeting of the United Nations to be held at the UN headquarters in New York City.
Hey everyone, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe for more awesome sci-fi content. You can also support us by hitting the thanks button at the bottom of the video. Your generosity goes a long way. Every bit helps us bring you more stories from the stars. Thanks a bunch.